Okay, Shabbos, everybody online. As Marsha McLuhan would say, the disembodied, disincarnated, three-dimensional folks who appear to us in two dimensions. Hi. All right, let's learn. Let's put the. We're having a Kiddush here, everybody. Kiddush is happening early here in the Romemu shul. We're gonna make their blessings over the Torah, because you have to, before you eat something, you have to make a bracha. So we're about to be nourished by Torah, and so we'll make a bracha. What's the bracha achrona for Torah? What's the bracha you make at the end of the meal? All right, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sheshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. All right. Can you share the text? Do I share the text? Who's sharing text?
I'm still just waiting for the source sheet, so.
Oh, okay. I can bring it up if I can find it here. Just, all right, so they'll be sending you guys. The text will be coming in a minute. We're gonna be looking at, for those of you who are following at home, we're in chapter 32 of the book of Exodus. Let's open up chapter 32 and turn to verse 15. And the sources should be on the way, but if you can find it wherever you are, and if not, listen. I'm going to be reading them out loud. Vayifen vayered Moshe Menahar. So chapter 32 pretty much picks up where, actually the end of chapter 31 picks up really where we had left off before we were interrupted by the tabernacle story. So for those who remember, so in the flow of Exodus, so we're in Parshat Yitro, we're at the mountain, receiving the 10 utterances. In Parshat Mishpatim, we're receiving the details, the laundry, all the kind of ethical and moral statutes that are in Mishpatim. And then from Mishpatim, all of a sudden, at the end of Mishpatim, do you remember the scene where, Lucy in the sky with diamonds, Moshe's in the sky with all of the Zakini, with the elders, right? And they see God, right? And the sapphire, the throne, the sapphire bricks, and under it, Kimas Elohim, they see this vision of God. And they sit down to have a little nosh, a little kiddush, and they eat and they drink, right? The end of Mishpatim, essentially Moshe has reascended to the top of the mountain, and Joshua is kind of hanging out somewhere in the mountain, and Moshe has gone up to the top of the mountain, and then all of a sudden, Parshat Truma happens, right? Truma is the beginning of the tabernacle story. It's like, and we're thinking, wait a second. You're leaving Moshe hanging up there. What's going on? Moshe's up there, and then the Torah goes into the tabernacle story. And the tabernacle is like Truma, Tetzaveh. We have two parshiot. One is, all about the actual tabernacle, what's inside of it, and the Kohanim and what they're wearing. And then at the end of chapter 31, which is the end of Parshat Tetzaveh, Vayike Chalos L'Daber, Moshe, all of a sudden is now reappearing. His absence from Parshat Tetzaveh is resolute and absolute. He's not in it, at least not named, although he's there. And now we're back to the mountain story. And like Kitisab, this is at the end of chapter 31, after Kitisab has already begun and told us about a census and some other things have to do with the Mishkan again. Now we're back with Moshe. And Moshe is at we find ourselves, Moshe is now has these tablets, and then the scene stops and chapter 32 begins, and the camera, as I said last night, pans to what's happening below on the mountain. So Moshe has got the tablets, that's the last moment. Chapter 32 brings us to the Israelites, and things are not good down at the bottom of the mountain, right? Even though Moshe at the top of the mountain is like, oh my God, I got these luchot, I have these tablets. Down at the bottom of the mountain, it's not so good. And the Torah will tell us in the first 8 psukim, that the people come to Aaron. We know the story. Come to Aaron and they say, "Where's this guy? This Zaish Moshe lo yadanu ma hayalo." We don't know what happened to this guy Moses. He's like, he's nowhere to be found. And Aaron doesn't put up a fight at all. And Aaron's like, "Okay, Sure, give me your golden rings. And they all say, sure. And they all take them off, and it's all happening very quickly. And before you know it, he takes all the gold and puts it into this thing called a cheret, some kind of engraving tool. And look what happens out of this gold, this molding tool, this engraving form. This egel masecha, this egel comes out, this golden calf, and they say, El Elohecha Yisrael, this is your God. They proclaim, the Israelites proclaim, not all of them, but just a few. This is your God, Israel, that took you out of Egypt, right? Word gets back to God. Somehow God knows in the story. And now we pan back up to the story with God. It was a very jealous God and very dangerous. Because God gets angry. He's like, oh my God, Lech reid ki shichet amcha. Get out of here because your nation has acted destructively. And then what then proceeds is that Moshe goes into quick, I love the Jewish people mode, and this is my job. I was made for this moment. God is angry. God says, I'm going to destroy them, and I'm going to make a nation for you. All this is happening in a quick, very quickly in chapter 32. And like in the first 15 verses of chapter 32. And then Moses, in 3 verses, says, God, as I said last night, that's not a good plan. Right? What are the Egyptians? What are the Egyptians going to say? And also, not only that, he says to God, "Lama yicharabcha? Why are you angry?" Which the Midrashim are like, what kind of question is that? Why is God angry? They just made a golden calf. And Moshe says, the first thing Moshe says as soon as he finds it, is like, "Lama yicharabcha be'amecha?" Why are you angry? And he says, not in my nation, be'amecha, with your nation. He turns it around. He says, don't be angry with your nation. Subtly saying to God, you can't just in a moment decide that they're not your people anymore. In the Zohar it says, Moshe says to God, when they sin they're my people, but when they're doing well they're your people. That's not a fair deal. It's like, it's like your kids, like go talk to your kid. Yeah. It's like, it's your kid also. Not now. So essentially Moshe, stands in the breach and he says to God the right script. He says, Zechor, Asher, he says, not only what are the Egyptians going to say, internally to you, you made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, you can't just, abandon the project. And so, as I said last night, God seems to have left open this avenue for Moshe to kind of pray. And Moshe prays, and it works. All right, so Moshe's job is done. Moshe's work is done. He has averted God's wrath, and the project is still on. It's like game on. I'm going to go down and I'm going to bring the people the tablets. That's what I originally was going to do. And is it okay now? Can I go down and bring the tablets? And it's like, cool. So look at source 1, which I hope you have, or not yet. Do you have it yet? Have you received it? You do. Not yet. Eden? Eden? Can you just ask Eden to share the PDF with the moderator? So we're still in the Torah. So if those of you who have Tanakh or you're following along, we're now in source 1, which you'll see when you get the sheets. But we're in your Tanakh. We're on chapter 32, verse 15. Yeah. Vayifen vayered Moshe Menahar, and Moshe turns and went down from the mountain. We'll come back to this word vayifen. Why does he have to turn? Again, every word in the Torah, like vayifen, means to turn from the word pan, which means face. He about faced, literally. He turned. It can also mean to sweep something clean, to empty something. Vayifen can mean to empty a room. Like lifanot means to take, if you want to reset the table and clear the table. To clear the table in Hebrew is lifanot. Like in modern Hebrew, if you're in a restaurant, you'd say, can you please clear the table? Lifanot means to take everything off the table. So come back to that double meaning of Moshe both turning here, but also clearing something. Okay, we'll come back to that. Vayifen vayered Moshe Menahar, and now he goes down from the mountain. Ushni l'chot ha'idut b'yado, and he has the 2 tablets of witnessing, right, in his hand. Should be in his hands, but it's in his hand. That leaves open some midrashic play. If it's only in one hand, how can he carry 2 tablets in one hand? It's his hand, okay. Luchot ksuvim mishnei evreim, that are written from both sides or both surfaces. Mizeh u'mizeh hem ksuvim. From this side and that side, they are written. Strange that the Torah has to go out of its way to describe how they're written. Why is it important for us that they're written on both sides? And going, like, making sure that it's clear to us they are written on both sides. Presumably, it's a pretty miraculous thing that it's either because they're written on both sides so that either which way you look at it, it's written on both sides, so you can look at it, everything it's double-sided, that God didn't want to waste any stone. Conservation is key. Or that at any angle that you look at it, you would see these important words. Or there's something miraculous about them being written in that way, and the Torah wants us to know that. In fact, if you look at the next verse, right, the very next verse, it seems the Torah wants us to know that these are really divine stones. If you look at the next verse, "V'haluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema," and these tablets these are godly tablets. They're ma'aseh Elohim. The michtav, and the written form is divine script, divine writing. Charut al luchot, inscribed or engraved on the stones. A number of years ago on Yom Kippur, I gave a sermon about the connection between the word regret and this word engraving. In modern Hebrew, they're connected, right? There's a connection between that which is inscribed. It almost feels as if it can't be undone, and remorse, which also feels like it can't be undone. So it's interesting, right, that this verse has to go out of its way to let us know the nature of the tablets are so divine that the tablets themselves are divine tablets, right? Thank you so much, Caroline. And the writing is divine. Vayishma, we'll come back to that in a second. Vayishma Yoshua et kol ha'am b're'o, and Joshua heard the sound of the people in its boisterousness, and then said to Moses, Kol milchama b'achana, I hear a sound of war in the camp. Presumably Joshua doesn't really know what's going on there either, could just hear it from a distance. But Moses corrects him and says, Ain't kol anot gvura. That sound is not the sound of the tune of triumph. Ain't kol anot chalusha. It's not the sound of the tune of defeat. In other words, we're not talking about, that's not what's going on, Joshua, because I know, because God told me. Kol anos anochi shamea. I hear the sound of song. Interesting. Kol anot. I hear. And then this verse, which we'll go over in a second, Vahi kasher karav el hamachanan, and it was when he came close to the camp and saw vayaret ha'egel umicholot, and saw the calf and the dancing. That has to be added here. I don't think God doesn't tell him about the dancing. Vayichar af Moshe. Now Moshe gets angry, and Moshe's anger is like, just note that Moshe was like, he wasn't angry when he heard about it, right?
Yeah,
right? When God told him about it, immediately God was angry, and Moshe says to God, "Why are you angry?" Lama yechara abcha, the same words, the same phrase. God, why are you angry? But of course, now Moshe has his own moment. Well, I'd love to know what you think. Why he has this moment, and he didn't have it before. Vayashlech miyadav, and he throws from his hand et aluchot, the tablets. Vayishaber otam tachat ahar, and he shatters them, he breaks them at the foot of the mountain. We have to know where he broke them. That's also interesting. So let's go over this for a second. Just to contrast the last verse here, verse 19, with what had happened up at the top of the mountain, which I just mentioned. Right, in source number 2, for some reason it's not in English either, but we just read this, right? So, and when he came close to the camp, he saw the calf, he saw the dancing, and he got angry, and then he threw the tablets, right? But previously, in verse 7 above, which we didn't read, God said to Moses, Lech red. I said, Kishichet amcha, right? They've gone off the path. So what's the difference? between the report that Moses received on the mountain and his response, and what Moshe and Moshe's moment when he gets angry. Why does Moshe get angry now and not before? What do you think? And we'll go to some other questions. What do you think? Yes.
The most obvious seems that, and we all see this in life, you can talk till you're blue in the face, but until you see something, it's the visual reality. It's abstract on some level on the mountain.
So beautiful. That's one opinion in Chazal. The rabbis, actually, that's one of the, right, the Al-Shich and others, and Shimshon Faro Hirsch, like Moshe hears something, in a domain, you can't compare hearing about something and then seeing it. So what Moshe originally hears it, and then now that he sees it, Torah goes out of its way to say that he saw it, and that's the distinction. Okay, that's one school of thought. Really great. And anything else? Any other suggestions why Moshe has this emotional response now, but didn't have it when he was up and hanging out with God? What do you think, Amy?
Well, the mediation role of, trying to say, don't worry, God, but, not wanting to get the big person angry, but then you really are angry and you're trying to protect this, and then you go here and you take it in yourself.
So great. There's a whole other school, like you've named already 2 of the 4 or 5 different schools of thought about Moshe's anger. Second school of thought is that Moshe, like a parent, and the principal is always saying, listen, I know that he screwed up, but you got to give him another chance. And then Moshe comes home and he's like, you cannot, so like Moshe plays these roles, like Moshe's here on the mountain, he knows I'm a leader. My role now is to be an advocate for the people, right? I'm with God. I can't lose my, what? I got, my chara. It's like chara here means angry, but I can't lose my chara. I can't get angry now. Now's not the moment. I have to wait. My purpose now is to be a sanegor, is to be a defense attorney for the Jewish people, and he does it very well. He does it again, by the way, later on in the parsha. He gets it for the second time. So great. That's the second school of thought. Third school of thought. Anybody else? Why Moshe? What's the difference between what happens on the mountain and what's happening down below? I don't know if there are any hands going up here in amongst the Chevra.
Yes, Jay. Yeah.
Jay, go ahead, brother.
This is slightly related to the previous, but I think maybe up in the mountain with his head in the clouds, Moshe is in an entirely different space, an entirely different place. That can't even be described. That is supernal.
So he was more disembodied in a way. Only God, but God gets angry too, and God's pretty disembodied. But yes, let's say Moshe is on a spiritual retreat, and Moshe's consciousness is at this point, so expansive. He's in a place of equanimity. He's not, he's been cultivating that state, and now, like, the descent from the mountain is also a reincarnated re-embodiment, and then he's more human, as it were. So that's one of the schools of thought too. So beautiful. It's related, but it's different. But it's also about the internal state, not remembering his role vis-a-vis the Jewish people, but in that state of mind, Moshe was like, listen, got it. Beautiful. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm thinking God is Moses' teacher, and even though he's disagreeing with the teacher in the moment, the lesson of you can get this angry. It is acceptable to have this reaction. It's like a delayed response, and he's like, just his nervous system hasn't caught up with his brain yet, and then he allows himself to feel what his teacher showed him.
So it's not found in the sources, but it's really good. It's very modern. That the mirroring of a teacher, or like like almost like God's modeling for Moshe that it's okay to be angry. It doesn't seem that Moshe has a problem getting angry, but in this moment, maybe it's true that he's able to receive, like God saying, listen, there are some things that should anger you. And then when Moshe internalizes that, he comes down the mountain, and he then does the same thing in a good way. Okay, that's another interpretation. Anybody else? We have? Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, the problem I have with this story is, what did they expect was going to happen? God forbid at 10 o'clock, if you decide you want to get something in front of the whole service, and you leave, not for 40 days, but for 15 minutes, there'll be pandemonium. In a crowd. And like, they come out of Egypt.
Right.
The wonders, the outstretched arm.
Yeah, all of
It's
that.
finally,
And now abandonment, yeah.
Uh,
Perceived abandonment.
and it's a complete, and only on the 39th day, it's a complete disaster.
Yeah,
So somebody had to be smarter than this.
right. Okay, so let's hold that.
Okay.
This critique of the story more broadly, like the meta critique of like, it seems everything is set up to fail in this way, and the surprise too shouldn't be so surprising. So all these things, let's come back to that in the last source that we're going to learn. Okay, so like 9:40.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, good. 9:40. Okay. All right. Last comment, and then I'm going to add a couple of pieces, unless
Just,
our amazing friend
just to
Thomas
suggest,
will. Go
no,
ahead.
not so amazing, but just that you can also flip the question around and say, not why is Moses angry at this moment,
Yes.
but Moses is the man of anger, I think, from beginning to end. From his interesting murder at the start of his story to striking the ground with the staff at the end. He's not a man of constant sorrow, he's a man of constant temper. So you could flip the question around and say, how and why does Moses restrain his anger as he interfaces with God? And it reminds me of the one line I love in the entire Marvel Expanded Universe, where Bruce Banner as the Hulk, he sometimes manages to sustain his strength as the Hulk, the big green man, and his intellect as Bruce Banner, and I don't know, Spider-Man or someone asks him, how do you do that? He says, well, the secret is I'm angry all the time. The secret is I'm angry all the time. And so I wonder if Moses has the same secret. And the question is opposite.
Right. Funny. Okay, so you flipped it on its head, which is good. As I love it when you do that. It's beautiful. So I'm not going to anything that stands alone. And I'll say this last thing about Moshe's anger here is that you know, Moshe is like the Moshe. One particular thrust that nobody mentioned is that he saw the dancing. Like there was something about the dancing that some commentators pick up on. He heard about the Egel Hazab, he heard about the golden calf, but Moshe had in his mind, according to one or another school of thought, is that from the time that Moshe was descending from the mountain, he thought maybe the people had regretted what they had done. That's another school of thought. And in his descent, he was hoping that he would come and find the people that were remorseful, that knew what that felt the sense of like, a little guilt, a little something about their behavior. But when he saw them dancing, says this commentator, that was it. That he couldn't handle it. And that's why the Torah goes out of its way to mention the dancing here, but doesn't mention that when God tells the story, he only says that they were worshiping the calf. God doesn't say they were dancing. And so the dancing was like a level that Moshe just could not handle. It was one thing that they make mistakes. In fact, you'll see in a moment when he breaks the tablets, according to yet another theory about why he broke the tablets, he was trying to say something about his own humanity to the Israelites. Like, I can handle that you made a calf, but like that you don't realize at this point that, you know, it was some time between making the calf and now that you made a boo-boo. Like at least like, you know, some remorse. It's like coming home to your house. You're like, at least your kid is like, you know, realizes somebody came and told him like that's not an okay to do. But instead, like, you know, dancing and singing about it, Moshe couldn't handle it. That was like too much for him. So that's another theory, which is that Moshe's ire was only raised when he saw that the people were not repentant on any level. And one could also pick at that interpretation and say, like, really? I mean, how much time passed and nobody rebuked them? Okay, but yet another piece. So we've kind of interrogated at this moment why Moshe was angry here, but wasn't angry on the mountain. But we haven't yet touched, and we now will, like what's going on with breaking the tablets? Like we always assume that, okay, so we got angry and he broke the tablets, but really? He gets angry in other places. It's true, he stamps his foot and he knocks the ground with he hits things. But the Torah went out of its way to tell us how divine these tablets were. And there's a reason for that. I think the Torah wants us to feel even greater shock that Moshe broke them. Like they're so divine and they are so perfect. How could Moshe let himself throw them and break them? So there are a number of schools of thought. So let's look at those as we move forward in the source sheet. How could Moshe? So some of the commentators deal with this by saying, if you look on the bottom of page 2, source 5, that Moshe didn't really intentionally break the tablets. We'll call this the school of, you missed it, go back up. The school of accidental breaking. And there are a number of different theories on the accidental breaking. Moshe, look at source 5. Moshe took the luchot and went down the mountain, and the letters were carrying themselves. And Moshe, in other words, these are heavy tablets. Like, a little bit, remember Mel Brooks, The History of the World, remember my dating? I had 15, oi! 20, right? So Moshe is carrying heavy stone. How can Moshe, who was presumably not Arnold Schwarzenegger, how can he carry these heavy stones? Oh, he wasn't. The divine writ that was in the stone made it light. It's a beautiful idea. Kind of that which animates the body, if the stones of the body. The incarnated life is animated by consciousness. And so these stones too are animated by the consciousness of the divine letters that are in them, and carrying the stone, and carrying Moshe. Moshe is carried by, he's not carrying the tablets, they are carrying him. But the minute they saw, meaning the letters saw what was happening, the letters decided that they didn't want to be on the ground in the world, and so the letters left the tablets, and what was left for them to do? The tablets were too heavy now for Moshe, and they just fell to the ground. That's one theory. Gemara, okay. If you look above in Shemot Rabbah, which I thought was translated, but apparently not also. I think I've a lot of untranslated things here. That's my bad. Sorry. So just I'll read it out loud. There's in Exodus Rabbah, the great Midrash, it says in source 4, right before this source for Caroline, right above the Hebrew right there. If you could just scroll, there you go. It says about 6 lines down, or 4 lines down. When Moses came close to the mountain, he didn't break them until he saw with his own eyes. This teaches us a couple of lessons. One, a person should never take as truth that which they hear until they see with their own eyes. That's one interpretation. And then it says, Ki shichet amcha ela hodia Moshe derech eretz l'Yisrael. I'm sorry. Afil shi adam shomer davar min yichidi ne'eman asur lekabel eduto lasot davar al piv imenu ro'eh. So that's what I just said. This teaches us common courtesy, that even if you hear something about someone with their ear from a very trustworthy witness, right, you should still not receive that testimony in full until you see it with your own eyes. That's like one moral lesson. The next davar here, another thing to teach you, sheparchuak tuvim min aluchot, that the letters flew off of the tablets. Lakach shibran, and for that reason he broke them. Then another thing. Here's another interpretation of why he broke them from Shemot Rabbah. Not along the same lines as the accident, but this one to protect the Jewish people. Moshe saw that the Jewish people had sinned, and so he broke the tablets. What can this be compared to? It's a mashal, a parable. To a person that took a woman as his wife, right? And wrote, like an officer or like a man of the court or a king who betrothed the woman and decided to write a ketubah and put it in the hand of a messenger. God forbid, after a little amount of time, they heard something about this woman that wasn't appropriate. The messenger took the ketubah, the marriage document, and tore it to pieces. Amar mutav shtei nidonet kifpunya v'lo ki eshet ish. He said it's better, right, that the woman, for the woman's sake, that she not be judged as a married woman, but as a single woman, as it were. In other words, make sure that what she did was not prohibited. If she were married, it would have been prohibited. So that's the parable here. This is another stream of thought. That Moshe came down the mountain. He had written on the ketubah of the Jewish people, on the marriage document of the Jewish people, it said, you can't have any gods other than me. right? The second of the Ten Commandments. And he said, you know what? I'm going to break the tablets so the Jewish people and their sin not be judged as if they were they were already married to God, but rather I'm going to rip it up into pieces. So that's another school of thought, all along the lines of Moshe's acting to protect the Jewish people. Now, there's another in that whole school of thought of protecting the Jewish people, right? Right? It's like there's another there's another piece here, which is that he broke the tablets, right, in that theme in order to protect them, because Moshe thought if they had the luchot, if he gave them those tablets, right, they would have been okay. Never mind. I can say the whole school. So those are not, this is the school of thought that says that in some way Moshe should not have broken the tablets. So let's figure out a way that he should not have broken them. One is that he shouldn't have broken them because, I mean, he didn't break them because they broke of their own accord. That's one school of thought, which is just shocking because the simple meaning of the verse is, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, is that Moshe says, I threw them down when I was angry. So the ones who are struggling with that, it's really far-fetched. I mean, not that the Midrash is not far-fetched, but right, so Moshe breaks them, and he didn't really break them. They just broke of their own accord. And then the second school of thought, which is they didn't break of their own accord. Moshe intentionally broke them, but not, God forbid, because he was angry. That wouldn't be appropriate. But he did it for the good of the Jewish people. Okay, I'm going to stop there and get some comments on that. Any thoughts in the comments?
I have a question. To what extent did the Kahal really know that this was a forbidden act?
I mean, it would seem that they knew. Well, that's a good question, actually, because it seems like something wrong is going on, right? God seems to be saying to Moshe, everybody who hears about it seems to be having a problem with it, and it's only a small number of people that actually did it. And so, if you think of the Torah chronologically, that all the people heard and saw that I am the Lord your God that took you out of the land of Egypt, and you shall have no other gods before me, and they say, this is our God that took us out of Egypt, that's a little bit. I mean, there are commentators that try to figure out what's really going on because they can't believe that anyone, after seeing God, would then be able to do this. And so the Ramban says, oh, it's a calf because the bull was the bull is in the vision of Ezekiel. The bull is one of the four faces, and so they were trying to worship that aspect. He was a Kabbalist, so trying to make it Kabbalistic. You know, the rabbis later on also blame God. Like Moses says to God, "How can you blame this people when you put them in Egypt for 210 years or 400 years? What do you think they were going to do when the minute that they were feeling anxious? They're going to make a god like the god that they saw in Egypt." So there are midrashim that actually bring God to the table and say, "Wait a second." There are a number of rabbinic midrashim that say, like, when Moses said, "Lama yechera abcha," why are you angry? The midrashim there say that Moshe was saying it in a much more charif way, a more strident way. How could you have not seen that this would happen, God? Like they give a parable of like, the parable is a really interesting parable of someone who sets up a shop to make money in some bad neighborhood in a street where there are prostitutes, and gives his son the job to watch over the shop. And then he comes to the shop one day and finds his son with one of the prostitutes. This is in the midrashim. They're pretty risque, and in the midrash, the father wants to like kill his kid, and some friend of the father says, like, what's your fault?
Right.
What are you doing? You set up a shop, in a bad neighborhood, and then you expect that your kid is going to be able to withstand this kind of temptation. And Moshe says to God, like what I said, like, what are you thinking? Like, you had to bring the Jews and put them in Egypt of all places. That's where they worship like sheep, the Aries, like they worship sheep. But like, what are they going to do? They get nervous. They go back to their old ways. It's like having a kid who's has a drug addiction, and you set up like like a bar and give your kid like watch the bar. It's like the children of Israel, like sitting in So Yeah, so it's not clear necessarily, but I think from the simple text, it's pretty clear that they did something wrong, yeah.
I hope this isn't disrespectful, but I'm just wondering whether the tablets themselves were all that significant. I mean, if he's already, if the words flew off already, you could say he had already absorbed them and could transmit them. And is the physical object that significant?
Well,
I'm just wondering,
no,
you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out the
yeah.
context.
in
How
turn-
significant is the tablet itself, the physical object?
Well, internal to the text, it would seem that it is. In other words, that it seems that verse 30, like 16 in chapter 32, is going out of its way to let us know how holy this object is.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, and we'll get to this in the last source, is that it's not hard to see this as a synoptic. If you were making this to a movie, you would have you'd have a split screen, and you'd have the children of Israel with their golden calf, and their engraving, because it says that they engraved this thing, and then you would have this Moses on the mountain receiving this engraved object as well.
Mm.
And in a moment, you'll see that Moshe does to the golden calf what he did to the tablets.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to completely destroy the golden calf. He's going to grind it and make it into some kind of strange, smoothie. But Moshe destroying the tablets, and the people, like you'll see in the last source, there is some symmetry here between the veneration of an object on the one hand and an object that should be venerated, but is destroyed as well on the
But
other.
the words of the tablet have
Right.
not disappeared.
Right, exactly.
But there's a lot
Can I say
around.
Okay, we have who wants to say something?
Yeah, I'm Ronan. Hi, David. I'm joining from Connecticut. I'm part of your synagogue.
I
So,
can't see.
can you hear me?
No, לא רואים אותך בכלל.
לא רואים? I don't know. My video is on, but I don't know. Anyhow, what I want to say was that one way to look at this problem is the transition from the metaphysical realm to the physical realm. Okay, so all this story has to do with the transition of spirituality from the metaphysical God spheres that Moses can access to the physical realm that we live in. So the Torah, I think the Luchot HaBrit, was an example of something that was existing on a spiritual level, but when he saw the golden calf, it was reduced to just physical element and then it get broken. The stones get broken, but as it was said before, the concept is eternal. The spiritual concept of Luchot is eternal.
אוקיי, רונן, יפה אמרת, ברור שכיוונת. You said beautifully, and we're going to get to that in the last source too, okay?
Could I make a comment?
Yeah, I was about to say, Sharon, go ahead. Sure.
Thank you.
I just want you to know, I'm having a hard time seeing hands that are raised, so I'm trying to rely on Carol and others to, okay, go ahead, Sharon.
Well, I think the problem with the tablets was actually their perfection. And that I think Moses realized. For me, the parallel, I mean, I don't know that he knew Kabbalah. Let's say, I don't know. But, what I think about God putting the light in the vessels and the vessels broke, it needs to be a broken light, right? Aren't there all these images of Moshe coming down from the mountain with the light coming off of him, emanating from him? It's too much. It's too perfect. It's too perfect for our imperfect world. And that's the moment where he realized that. So we need to have the imperfection in the second tablets. I think that's the point.
So I want to underscore your point. Again, I keep saying we got to look at the third source because it's a very modern. It's a very modern and very relevant interpretation that both you, Ronen, a number of others. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to bring two more sources on why he broke the tablets that are much more connected to the text in some way, meaning it seems that Moshe breaks the tablets in anger, not in any higher, I love your interpretation, Sharon, because it's clear from many sources, Yitzhak HaRamah in the 16th century, that also says that the difference between the first tablets and the second ones is one was perfect and one was imperfect, and that the perfect can't live in this world. That's true and stands on its own merit, but in the text itself, it seems that Moshe is angry. So look at source number 8. Source number 8, Rashi, who's quoting from, this is the Talmud. Source 7 is Rashi, but he's taking it from source 8. The Talmud in Masechet Shabbat says this. Can you see where, source 8, the bottom of page 4? Amar lecha Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi could have said to you, Yom echad osi Moshe midato, detanya shlosha dvarim asa Moshe midato. 3 things Moshe did of his own dot, his own accord, his own volition. In other words, without asking God's permission, he did it just like, oh, I have an intuition, I'll just do this. And God said, great, I agree, after the fact. We're not going to go into all 3 of them, but the third one is, he broke the tablets. Shavar Luchot Maidarash, he said, Rabbi Yossi said that Moses broke the tablets without God's permission, without like taking God's counsel in. Like he just did it in the moment, he was pissed, right? And God said, great. So what did Moshe internally, what was his internal deliberation? That's what the rabbis ask. As if Moshe was already a Talmudic scholar. It's deeply anachronistic. The rabbis in the Talmud are now reading Moshe as if Moshe was living at the time of the Talmud. And before he did anything, he had to have some exegetical move. He had to like have internally some kind of like Talmudic source. He couldn't do it without just, So what's this? What did Moshe, how did he expound? He said to himself, Ma Pesach shu echad mitayaga mitzvot, amna Torah v'chol ben nechar lo yuchal bo. He said, just as the Paschal offering is only one of the 613 commandments, and on that one, we're told that someone who is a ben nechar, someone who is not a child of Israel, can't eat from it, right? Meaning, like, if you were an apostate, and you were, like, even if you were a Jew, and you were, quote unquote, acting as if you were not a Jew, you would not be allowed to eat from the Paschal offering. The Torah, the entire Torah, Yisrael Mishumadim Alacha Kama V'Kama, he said, now we're talking about the Torah that I'm holding in my hands. It has all 613, and the children of Israel, are acting as if against the entire Torah, right? That I have to break it. Asher Shibarti has to break it. So how do we know that God gave Moshe Yeshikoach, that God agreed with him? Because when God says to Moses, bring me a second set of tablets and I'll inscribe on them the things that were on the first one that you broke, the words, I said this last night, the words Asher Shibarta that you broke seem to be cruel and not necessary. Like God didn't have to say, I'll write on the second tablets the things that were on the first ones, period, that you broke. Why does God have to remind Moshe that he broke them? So the rabbis couldn't read God as being cruel, but he had to hear Asher Shibarta as Ya'asher Kochacha Sheshibarta. They read the word Asher, that as Osher, meaning wealth. As if God were saying, I'm so happy that you broke the tablets. The ones that you broke, I'm happy you broke them. Wow. So Rashi, in the vein of this, of the Gemara, seems to be saying that Moshe broke the tablets on purpose to say to the Jewish people, you don't deserve them. You do not Sharon Dolan's beautiful read about ontology, that the perfect can never be good in an imperfect world, but no, you are acting like a bunch of apostates. You are not acting like the Jewish people that received the 613 commandments. You're acting like a group that wants to, you're not going to give you the Torah. You don't deserve the Torah. So he breaks them in anger. Now, the last source before we get to this, the penultimate source, before we get to the last source, which I kept saying, let's wait for the last source, is the Ramban, Nachmanides, source 9. Nachmanides doesn't care about the Israelites in his interpretation. He thinks Moshe broke the tablets in anger, not because of some internal plan and some, like, I can't, I'm angry at them and all of this. In the Ramban's reading, it's as simple as this beautiful reading of, what's your name? Mia? Mia. Like, Moshe learned from God that there are some things you just can't, you can't control. You care too much. And in the Nachmanides reading in source 9, he says, Moshe did not, if you look at it in the English, I guess the 6th line, I guess it is, despite all this, Moses did not hesitate to break them. He says, like, listen, they're perfect. God gave them to Moses, all of the things that we said. But despite all of this, Moses did not hesitate to break them because he was angered upon seeing the evil sight. He could not restrain himself. The Hebrews, lo yacholit apek. So the way that, that Nechama Leibowitz reads Nachmanides is that Nachmanides, who lived in the 13th century in Spain, he says that Moshe as a leader, he couldn't contain his frustration, his anger. He loved the Jewish people so much, and he was so disappointed with them. And he knew that he's not supposed to break them. He knew that they were perfect, and again, notwithstanding Sharon's read, he couldn't control himself. He was too affected. He was too attached, to the people. He couldn't contain. The word litapek means it bubbled over in him. He couldn't contain himself. He was too nogea b'davar. He was too interwoven with their fate. And his leadership, he couldn't keep himself from being affected. Now, the last source is going to take everything that we just said and give the most elegant of all of the answers. The last source, which is source 10 and 11, which I'll have to read in the Hebrew because I didn't have time to translate it, but it's written by somebody named Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, who lived in the 19th century. And it's a decidedly modern read, and I'm gonna read it and then open up for the last 10 minutes or so. And he's going to take into account why Moses gets angry at this moment, but not angry up above when God tells him the oral narrative. He's going to take into account that Moshe is not the kind of person that should be getting angry in this way with these perfect tablets. He's going to take into account that they are perfect, and the Torah went out of its way to tell us that they're perfect. He's going to take into account all of these things and give us, I think, the most elegant and resonant and modern reading that actually fits into the text, I think, more beautifully than any of the earlier interpretations. So let's listen or follow along. Sorry about that. Vayikasher karav el machaneh. And it was when Moshe came close to the camp and he saw the egel in Mecholot. And he throws the tablets. I'm on the second line where it says Ha'inyan. Here's where I am here. Yeah, where the cursor is, Ha'inyan. And I'll go super slowly if you want to try to follow. Source 10 on page 5. The matter, Ha'inyan means the matter is. In other words, here's my interpretation. Ki HaTorah v'ha'emunah, the Torah and faith. Hema ikarei ha'umah Yisraelit. These are the essence of the Israelite nation. V'chol ha'kidushot, and all of the holy things. Aleph Yud is Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, Jerusalem, all of these things, etc. Hema pirtei usnifei Torah v'kadshu b'kedushat Torah. All of these things are holy. All of these elements and the details and the minor details of Torah. All of these things are made holy through the agency of Torah. For that matter, all elements of the Torah are the same, whether in all time and space, whether it's in the land of Israel or outside the land of Israel. And they're equal for whether it's the person of high stature, the highest of the high, Hagavah shebegvohim, the highest of the high, Moshe ish Elohim, Moses, the godly man, lahashafel shebeshvalim, to the lowest of the low. And all of that doesn't matter. It's one law for all of them. So I'm going to go. 1 second. And all of it, I'm sorry, let me go lower. No, don't go lower, not that far. There it goes, stop, lower there, thank you. Here, all of it is one matter, the Torah and God and so on. But the reality of the Torah, Eino talui rak ilata ilot yivarach shemo. All of this existence, the Torah, the land of Israel, all of these holiness things that are in this world are all dependent on the cause of all causes. V'hinei dala seichel katsar yado. He said, someone whose mind is dull, his hand is short, meaning it's hard for the mind, if its mind is not sharp, to understand, right? If you can move your cursor for a second, Caroline. Just move your cursor, or is that my cursor? It's mine. It's hard for the mind, sorry. It's hard for the mind that is dull to comprehend the reality, the existence of the divine in its most abstract form. ולכך חתרו להם מסילות לעשות צורות ודמיונות או כוונים או כאילו המערכת שמיים לאמור זה המרכבה ללקות וזה משגיח והמסווג כל העניינים בעולם. It says, because the mind can't grasp things that are too abstract and concepts that are very ethereal, we were permitted to have forms and pathways and imaginings in order to get there. Right? We imagine angels, we imagine God, we talk about God with a name, whatever that is. Like the way that the Rambam talked about, the way we use anthropomorphisms, we talk about God with a hand or with will. Even the word mitziut, existence, is a borrowed term from things and applied to the divine. V'zeu ha'mashgiach v'hamsavev kol ha'inei b'olam v'lo avdu v'zavichu v'hektiru v'rikudei nefesh v'tichut adam mitavem mimusad muchashiv v'nir'ah. He says all of these things are very useful as what we would call it in Buddhism upaya, skillful means, right? And to those things they serve and they sacrifice and they get their blood boiling and the soul gets excited, right? From all of those concepts that are sensory and seen. And these people, the Israelites who were sitting at the bottom of the mountain when they saw that Moses wasn't coming, he said their faith diminished. They lowered their level of faith in the abstract God. And they requested, he said they decided to come from the abstract God to the very physical expression, the tzura, the physical form, and to then invest it with divine energies. Right? Anyway, he says, that's what was going on. They were making an idol. Now you can go to the next page, Caroline. Okay, source 11. And on that, and this is what Moshe was screaming about. He says Moshe was screaming, am I a God? Am I a God? He says, what are you? He says, he looked at them, he said, do you think that I took you out of Egypt? Right? He said that now when I'm not here, you go nuts. For 10 minutes I'm not around. Did you invest me with energy? Like, who am I? Like, I'm not there for, like, you saw that I wasn't coming down the mountain. You clearly made me into an idol. You are now, fascistically, you invested me with power. He said, I'm also human just like you. And Torah ain't tluya, and the Torah doesn't belong to me. I'm not the Torah. It's not dependent on me. He said, even if I didn't come, the Torah would also have been a reality without anything. If I hadn't given the Torah also would have been given in some way. And it goes into all these things. And then he says, Al tidmu kemikdash v'mishkan hema inyanim kidoshim atzmam. And now don't invest land and the holy temple and the tabernacle with holiness, inherent holiness. All of them are serving God. Right? Like he said, I'm not going to go the whole thing. He said, but if God were to remove God's self, so to speak, from all those things, if the people forgot that the divinity there was just a means towards the end, if they started to fetishize, and now I'm going off of my own way of saying this, if they fetishized the finger that was pointing to the moon and forgot that all of it was a means towards the moon, then he says that would become avodah zarah. And I'm going to stop here and open it up, and let me tell you the final upshot. Why did Moses break the tablets at that moment? Because seeing the golden calf and seeing the way the Israelites had invested both him and that reality, right, with some kind of inherent holiness, he said they were going to do the same thing to the tablets. And Moshe breaks the tablets now and gets angry now because he sees how low that they had lost their capacity to orient themselves towards the holy in its most abstract form, and he was worried lest they do the same thing to these tablets that were so perfect, Sharon Dolan, that were so holy, that were so like already they were like, he thought they would now bow down to the tablets that had been written with God's own handwriting, and the Torah went out of its way. So the Meshech Chochmah says all of the answers now fall away. Of course, Moshe got angry at this moment, because the essence of his work was to see that the Israelites were pointing not towards him, but towards God, right? And that they had forgotten that. And so he breaks the tablets, and why does the Talmud go out of its way to say, yeah, Yashikoch Shishibart, the way to go that you broke them? Because God wanted the Jewish people not to fetishize the stones and the means, but to keep their eye on the prize, right? And that's the unique contribution of the Meshech Chochmah. He says that if you meet the Buddha on the road, is our analog would say, if you meet the perfect tablets on the road and the perfect prophet holding them, then you should break them. Especially if you've made a golden calf, when that physical object is no longer there. That's a final text. I'm opening it up for all of you, and we'll start in the room with Paul, and then Mia, and anyone else. Get Paul.
The most effective moment that I saw in my parental life was when my kids were doing something really bad, and I saw my wife burst into tears. She couldn't take it, and she just started crying, sobbing. And I saw my kids, they had all these excuses, they had all this structure they had built up, and they crumbled because they saw what they did in a very, very, very direct way. And I'm going to say, in answer to the question, that the tablets broke themselves, not because the letters flew away, but because the tablets themselves weren't strong enough to stand up to the emotion that Moses was feeling at that moment.
The tablets become like a reflection of Moshe's inner world, right? He's breaking up inside, and so they break, as an externalization of Moshe's own brokenness.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mia, yeah.
I just want to bring it back to dance. So dance as ritual is what the people seem to be doing. But the phrase that has been kind of left out is after, and he's angry, there's like a semicolon and then a trope. You'll hear there's like a break and a new phrase, and he hurled them. That's Moses dancing. That's his movement. So a dance of prayer as opposed to ritual. And then he breaks them underneath the mountain. So to me, he's doing his movement. He realizes the people aren't ready to receive this beautiful thing. And then the breaking, I totally see differently now, is when you've discarded a piece of art, the people aren't ready to see it. You break it up like tenderly to keep it almost, like because you love it so much. You don't just discard it. He's not leaving it and going somewhere else. It's intentionally that he's sitting with it, with the shelter of the mountain, like to lean on it, to break it, because he cares about it. I see it more as a piece of art that you would break up intentionally and carefully because you know it's not the right time.
It's true that artists destroy their own work.
Yeah, right?
I've seen that. It's part of making an art.
But he doesn't. But it's not his art, though. I mean, it's God's art. He hasn't made anything. He's just the divine. He is the caretaker for this art, and so yeah, it's true that it's very true. The tradition essentially says that that it isn't discarded. That they hold on to the broken tablets and they bring them wherever they go as maybe a reminder of Moshe's tenderness, of his unwillingness to destroy it in a way that the golden calf is completely destroyed, and there's no remnant of it. But the tablets are broken and then gathered up, right, as a reminder of that moment. It's a pretty brutal moment. It's a shocking moment. It is remarkable that God doesn't express any anger at Moshe for breaking them. Mm-hmm. It's just a continued shock. Yeah, that but he breaks them. So you think God doesn't get angry because of the way that Moshe breaks it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's still broken though. He still has to go and redo them. It's almost as if God wants Moshe to break them and is expecting this to happen, right? That's the sense one gets from reading the text, that this was all planned in some level. Or God's understanding of Moshe's anger, almost God like saying, yeah, now you understand why I was so angry on the mountain. If you had seen what I saw, right, you could defend them so long as you didn't see it. I saw it, right? There's also that, like, Moshe saying, almost like a parent who says, if I had been a parent, I wouldn't have done what you did, mom and dad, and then you become a parent and you do exactly the same thing, and your father says, now you get how hard it was not to get angry, right? You thought, right, again, so Moshe's angry, but he doesn't break it quite, that's Mia's take here, he doesn't break it quite in a way that would reflect that anger. Okay, another interpretation. I want to get to, just 1 second, I know that we have, I see David's hand up. I can't see anybody else's hand, but David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very consistent with what you're saying. I see this whole story literally as a handoff of responsibility. So until this point, it's been God's story. God is really the leader. Moses goes up there, and now it's almost a handoff and a test for Moses. Can you be the leader that I want you to be? And the key to this is really Aaron. Because Aaron is, I feel like he's kind of in on it. He's a very willing participant in the whole thing. So this is all going down there. Moses goes down. He passes the test of leadership, and the key is that he comes back up, and the new tablets are written in Moses' hand. And there's a divinity that kind of happens with him.
No, David, they're written in God's hand. But what your point is taken, that part of the process is a human divine. Right, God, Moshe is Solachai, he has to carve out the stones, which is ostensibly very different than the first tablet. So that's very true. And handing off also, it's something very beautiful about what you're saying, David, because in Kitisa, the whole Kitisa moment, which is really the centerpiece of Exodus, is that we often think of, like, the Exodus happens, Moshe's a messenger, and God is at the center. The children see, Moshe and God, and they believe in both of them. And then Mount Sinai, they believe in both of them. But then there's the tabernacle moment. But in the center of the tabernacle, you have this betrayal story, which is really the center of the book of Exodus. The Kitisa narrative about the Egel HaZahav is the centerpiece. All of our eyes are drawn to it because it's so literarily beautiful. It's so shocking. It's so evocative. The prayers of Moshe for the people twice, he's going to be, right, Moshe, I didn't even say this, that Moshe says, I didn't even say this beautiful midrash, that when Moshe breaks the tablets, this is so profound. Moshe says, if you're going to be angry with the people for sinning God, I'm going to break the tablets because I also have just sinned. I'm going to break the tablets so that when you get angry at them, you'll also get angry at me. And if you decide to erase them from the book, you can erase me from the book too, because I also sinned. So he's breaking the tablets as a way of, like what we do on Friday night in my house, where one of my kids is designated, usually it's Or, the youngest one, to spill wine onto the tablecloth. So that any guest that spills wine will be like, oh, no big deal, right? So Moshe breaks the tablets as if to say, I'm with the people in my sinfulness. And now I'm interweaving my destiny with them. If you decide, whatever you decide to do with them, do to me too. And Moshe passes that test over and over again. And his reward when he gets the second tablet, as David said, he'll be a participant in it. And on behalf of the Jewish people, now it'll be a partnership. And moreover, at the end of the parsha, Moshe's face will be illuminated in the exact way that God's face is illuminated. As if to say that Moshe now is even more of a divine figure, but also even more connected to the people. And there is an even greater partnership. And his reward, right? The rabbis think that his reward the illumination of his face comes from the tablets. In fact, even one Midrash, Yalkut Shimoni, says that Moshe gets the light of its face from the space between the tablets they're given to Moses and God's hand as they receive the tablets. There's a space there. And Moshe reaches beyond the tablets to grab God's light, as if to say that Moshe represents the human desire to elevate and to go beyond, and even sees in the golden calf a moment of human yearning and dancing. And then Moshe is an advocate on every level for the Jewish people, and passes the test, David, as you said, with flying colors, becomes a real Ed Naaman, like a really trustworthy shepherd. One more, and then we got to run upstairs.
Just fast.
Yeah.
I saw this as being, I mean, everything that was said is really wonderful, but God's gift to the Jewish people, like a marriage and a gift within a marriage, and Moses is carrying the gift as the agent of God. So when he sees the people dancing, it's not his gift to destroy, but he's acting for God, saying, no, no, no,
Right.
this marriage can't take place now. You're not the proper spouse right now. He in a way, he doesn't have the right, but he's acting for God to say that, no, I'm breaking the engagement.
Right, that's the Midrash that says that he was acting, right, that's exactly the parable of the Midrash. I saw so many hands, Mariam and others, sorry, that we didn't get to all of you. I'll just add one. You know what, Mariam, quickly, because Jay already spoke once, and I'll just go. Miriam, go ahead, Margot.
Okay, so what if the people wanted the immanence of God, and Moshe represents the transcendence of God, and they will get the Mishkan, and the word Shekhinah is in there. Mishkan, they need that dwelling within them, so they made the calf because they had this yearning. They'll get the Mishkan, and in the hike up to the 13 attributes, Moshe will ask for the kavod, Harini et kavodecha. What if they really wanted more of the Shekhinah? They want Aaron. They want someone who can dwell in them and make peace. What if that's the yearning? And so it's this balance between the eminent and the transcendence, and they get this new covenant with the 13 attributes.
It's beautiful. I mean, that's the Zohar. That's the tradition that wants to defend Moses. The tradition wants to defend the Jewish people is just shocking in its creativity and its willingness to stretch this pshat. And it's beautiful. I mean, I think the desire to stretch the pshat of the text, the simple meaning of the text, is also rooted in a love of Israel, a love of the people, a desire to understand, like, the enormity of this moment. Like, how could this happen? And it's true. It's like this is what over the last 2,000 years, the Jewish, the hermeneutical devices that have been used to kind of read the Jewish people in a good light, and Moshe in a good light, even God in a good light. It's all wonderful. It's part of our yearning to make sense of what seems to be nonsensical behavior. Like, it just seems really odd that Jewish people would make a golden calf. The whole story is really, frankly, shocking. And Aaron's role in it is shocking. Why an egel? Why a calf? The whole thing is just. I'll add one personal story that when the rabbis later say that what happened to these tenderly broken tablets is that the Jewish people carried them with them wherever they went. And the luchot, v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron, that they always stayed together, as if to say that they were of a piece. Like Leonard Cohen, Leonard Cohen's, anthem, you can forget your perfect offering, there's a light that comes in only through the broken, crack and everything. So when my wife and I were going to be married, we had a very ornate ketubah that we commissioned, and it came, and there was a mistake in it. And we had to ask for a second one, and we were going to destroy this first one, because what do you do with a ketubah that you're not going to, it's like it's just sitting there, and it's beautiful. Is that there are a couple of mistakes that just made it, you couldn't use it. And it wasn't like we could give it to somebody, like, here's a ketubah for you, So we kept it. And then when we broke the glass at the wedding, we kept that too. And then we got a picture box, and we put around the first ketubah all of the broken glass from the chuppah.
That's very great.
And we hold it as exactly this teaching, which is, there are, the Torah, whether it wanted to or not, gave to us a profound, simple lesson about what one does with trauma and brokenness, when things that you thought were perfect break, when perfect marriages that you thought would be perfect break, when perfect, democracies are imperfect, and we have to work hard to create a second set of tablets and safeguard them and hold the precious remnants of perfection as an ever aspirational yearning that we hold in our imperfect world, to speak to Sharon's moment. And that we who live in this, with this stuff, right, around us at all moments, we are given to anger. We are given to not being the bodhisattva ideal that the tzaddik ideal. We are given to being, real and bursting into tears when things happen. But the Torah also gives us this path forward to rebuild, and it's really powerful. The rabbis use all of this story as part of the liturgy and part of the imagery that accompanies us on the high holidays. right? So these are the verses that we use for forgiveness. When we wear a kittel, that white garment, people say it's about purity. It's not Gesundheit. It's about this perfect light that we were born with that then breaks. And so we remind ourselves on Yom Kippur that we are made of light, but we're also of flesh. And so we ourselves become the ark that holds the broken tablets and the whole ones on Yom Kippur. We say, look at us, all dressed to kill, as Leonard Cohen says, with our rags of light, wearing these kittles. We were once perfect too, but look what we fell into. We got angry, we got jealous. We're not perfect, God. But forgive us the way that you forgave the Jewish people and gave them a second chance with this.